Hello again, this is Tony Coe, and you're listening to Refinement, Not Retirement, the podcast that's dedicated to the idea that refining your life is preferable to retiring from it. This today is the second episode in our series about what, for Christine and I, we consider to be one of the biggest and best refinements that we've ever made to our lives, and that is going vegan. But today, those of you who are watching on video will notice that I'm not with my co-host and wife and lifelong partner, Christine, but I do have a surprise guest with me. And as you can see, it's not Christine. This is Kelly Donaldson, who I'm very excited to talk to, who, among her very many talents, is an arts journalist, but more important than that in my life, a very close friend to Christine and me. We met Kelly and her husband Brian on a vegan river cruise. We mentioned, I think, vegan travel, great discovery in our lives in our last episode. So how are you today, Kelly?
I'm very well, thank you. Lovely to join you. Always very happy to talk about the wonders of discovering veganism.
Yes, it is indeed. And I'm looking forward to what you've got to say. Has spring sprung in bonnie Scotland?
Yesterday it did. It was sunny. We had our quota of sunshine probably for 2023, and it was lovely. We're back to grey skies again, but Edinburgh's beautiful in other ways, as people who've been here probably know.
I know. Well, indeed, the whole of your country is beautiful in many ways. Anyway, I'm very excited to hear what you've got to say about our mutually favorite topic, which is veganism. So you've listened to our first episode in this series, entitled, rather teasingly, Going Vegan Ruined Christine's Life. So, dear listener, if you want to find out a bit more what's behind that, then if you haven't listened to the episode, I would encourage you to go check it out. But that episode really covered how Christine and I became vegan, and it would be really lovely to hear, maybe start there, Kelly, if that's okay, as to what brought you to veganism.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I just say, though, on the subject of you ruining Christine's life, which is obviously hilarious, is I think Christine is one of the best advocates for veganism that I've come across, because she was so adverse to it and now cooks fabulous meals, has embraced it wholeheartedly, and is, a true testament to how it can change things for people. And I think it's lovely the way that she has done that in a relatively short amount of time.
She's going to love hearing that.
So yes, but back to me, I became vegetarian when I was a teenager. As a teenage girl, I remember there's an article in a newspaper about how animals were killed, and as a sensitive teenage girl, there's a lot of them out there. I thought, oh dear, I don't like the look of that. So I stopped eating meat, but carried on eating dairy quite happily. And then a few years later, as a student, also found out some information about the dairy industry that I wasn't too keen on. So I stopped eating dairy. But this is in the early 90s. And as you can imagine, getting vegan food then was nigh on impossible. I remember a lot of lettuce sandwiches when I went to people's houses. I lost a lot of weight, which was good to begin with. But then I kind of thought, I'm just hungry.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So that lasted for sort of 2 or 3 years. Then I was at university at the time, as I said, and then I moved to Edinburgh. Kind of a few things kind of crept back in, pieces of dairy. I never went back to meat. But then I became pregnant. There was very little information out there about ways you could get protein. I had no idea that there were lots of other ways you could get it. At that point, it was just, you've got to have your eggs and your cheese, otherwise, pregnancy won't go well. So anyway, I fell off the vegan wagon then for many, many years, up until about 7 years ago, when I started to be aware of some American doctors that were giving out some interesting information about the impact that dairy has on the body. I'd also noticed through the years that certainly going through primary school, my daughters, who I raised as vegetarian from birth, were very rarely ill. Whereas I was noticing all of my friends' children were off school with various throat infections and chest infections and all kinds of stuff. And I was kind of thinking the only difference between my daughters and their children was the absence of meat.
Sure.
So whereas I had done it for the animals, I started to think, oh, I wonder if there's some health benefits here. I'd never thought about that. I didn't care about that, but it became apparent that there were. And then, as I say, I listened to a couple of doctors. Dr. Dean Ornish, who people may be aware of, he was an American heart surgeon. He started to notice that the same people time and again were coming back on his operating table. And he started to think there's got to be a better way than just the bypass surgery and the drugs constantly. So he started to explore that. He's recently written a fantastic book called Undo It, which isn't just about preventing these things, it's about actually undoing certain heart conditions, diabetes, certain cancers, all with the same kind of thing, based on a whole food, plant-based diet. Dr. Michael Greger, I think you might have mentioned him before, his book, How Not to Die. I mean, we are obviously all going to die, but this is about not just prolonging it, because I know sometimes people joke and say, well, you might live longer as a vegan, but you just feel like it because it will be so boring and awful. But actually, it's not even about living longer. It's about living with a better quality of life, because we could all live to 95 sitting in a chair in a care home doing nothing every day, or we could live to 95 going out and running and having a lovely life and spending time with our family because our bodies are up to it.
Yes.
So then some documentaries, and that sealed the deal. I became vegan. I started talking to my husband about it. He'd been vegetarian for as long as I'd known him. He said, no, that's not for me. I said to my daughter, how about going vegan? She said, no, I like pizza and chocolate too much. I'm not doing that. So then I sat them down in front of, I think, What the Health, which you mentioned in the last episode.
Oh, that was hugely influential in my case. Yeah.
Yes. And at the end of that, they both turned to me and went, yeah, we're going vegan. And that was it. And then my other daughter shortly after, and my sister. So all the people who are in my close-knit circle are all vegan, which obviously makes it much easier when you go to each other's houses for dinner.
So was your daughter, I'm interested in what you said about your daughter. So your daughter, who said that she liked pizza too much. I mean, so was it hard? Was it just that she sat and watched What the Health, the Netflix documentary, or that was just that was enough?
It was just that. I'd kind of suggested to her that given that, I raised them both as vegetarian, people through the years would say to me, oh, that seems cruel. You should let them make their own mind up. And I thought, well, either way, it's kind of like religion. Either way, you are telling your child, here's how we live our lives. And I always said to them, when you're an adult or you leave home or whatever, you can do what you want, you can eat what you want. But in our house, we're going to be vegetarian. And then as they grew up, they absolutely have embraced it as well. But veganism, I think, felt a bit too difficult because, if you walk into any sweet shop or the confectionery aisle in Sainsbury's or whatever, it's wall-to-wall milk chocolate. And as a teenage girl who's hanging out with her friends and they're all eating pizza, as I say, and they're all eting bars of chocolates, I think at that point she said, I love twirls too much. The idea of giving up a twirl was like a bridge too far for her. But then the film had a real impact on her, as it did on you. There's lots of information in there. And even as a kind of teenage girl, she could see what was happening to the animals, which she definitely cared about. But she also saw the health benefits. And that was it. So, and fortunately, just the timing of it was right, because at that point, as you will have noticed as well, all of these vegan products started coming into the shops, and actually getting a really delicious chocolate, getting cheese, making your own pizza, getting a gorgeous pizza in Pizza Express with vegan mozzarella on. All of these things started to happen.
Yes. Absolutely. I think the thing that really impacted me most about what the Health documentary was, just seeing those people that were not even able to walk a few paces down the road, and within 2 or 3 weeks there was substantial improvement in their really chronic states of health. That I thought was just so impactful. And at that time, I was very much wanting to stick around for my grandchildren. I'd just been told that I had a couple of health issues, sudden spike in cholesterol, which I mentioned, and also high blood pressure. So, it really resonated with me. You've mentioned the vegan, the incredible substitutes that we now have, and you don't really have to want for anything, do you? I mean,
no.
I used to tease my daughter when I wasn't vegan, and she had been for many years, about bacon sandwiches. Don't you miss a bacon sandwich? You can really have a vegan bacon sandwich now, and it tastes fantastic, doesn't it?
It does. And this is the drastic difference for me, because in the early 90s, I think there was a thing called like a veggie burger mix, which you added water to make a little sort of vegetarian patty type thing. And that was it. There was a thing called sauce mix, which still lives on today and is great for making sausage rolls with. But other than that, there was absolutely nothing out there.
Yes.
And you know, ultimately, people are quite right when they say, but that's just a kind of processed food. And it is. And, you know, if you're doing this because you want to live longer or have a better quality of life, if you're going to, you know, there are junk food vegans. Of course, you could eat chips and burgers for your dinner every day. It's not going to make you, it'll be slightly better for you because the cholesterol from cheese and meat is not going to be in there, but it's still processed food. So we certainly try and have a mix of just lots of vegetables, and you might have a sort of, I kind of call it a sort of a gateway drug from eating meat to being a vegan or vegetarian, that you can find so many sausages, bacon, all of these kind of things. And you will get the odd person that would say, but why would you want to eat that? Why would you want to eat something that tastes like meat? Why would you want to eat something that looks like meat?
You get that all the time, don't you?
Absolutely. That is a standard question. And it kind of baffles me slightly because it's so handy. You know, if you get a burger, you can put it in a bun. If you get a sausage, you can have it with your mash and your gravy. They're all, but the reason that these things were turned into those shapes in the first place is because they're handy. You know, that doesn't look like a cow lying on your plate when it's a burger, or a pig as a sausage. These are useful shapes. So why wouldn't the kind of vegetarian and vegan food manufacturers do a similar thing? And in terms of taste, most of us have grown up eating meat. Until the age of 15, I loved having chicken and pork chops and all of these kind of things. You know, I found the taste very nice. I just didn't really want somebody to die on my behalf so that I could eat it. And as I say, that's before I discovered the health benefits. And I do think that for a lot of people, health is the way in here. And the environment.
Well, it was for me, certainly, the health thing. Yeah. And then I came to the animals and the climate, you know, later, really.
Exactly. And Tony, tell me, what was that like for you? Because I think I might have said this to you before, I think it's like an impressionist painting. When you go up close to something like that, you see all of these smudges of paint and it means nothing to you. And you step back across the room and you think, oh, it's a beautiful field, it's a house, it's a sunset, because you can see what it is. And I think that while you're eating, almost like while you're sort of complicit in it, while it's part of your life, you cannot look at it and see it for what it is. But once you step back from it, because you've made a decision, my health is going to suffer from this, I'm going to step back, I'm going to stop eating meat. I think that once you've had the ability to kind of look at it from a different angle, then you start to think, oh, actually, when I walk down the meat aisle in Sainsbury's, that is a cut up pig that's wrapped up in under cellophane there. It's not just a chop or a sausage. And I honestly don't think that you can see it that way while you're eating it.
Yes, I've certainly had a complete revolution in the way I think. I mean, as I say, I used to tease my daughter about the fact that, you know, her diet was so faddy and, you know, and so on. But now I'm completely different. So I mentioned, as you say, walking through the meat aisle and seeing body parts. So that's you know, awful. But now that we live in the Cotswolds, in the countryside, and I walk through the fields, and especially this time of year, and you see these beautiful little lambs, and you know, they're really so trusting of humans, but you know, they're wary, and you could obviously have a natural instinct. They want to protect their young. It's actually interesting that the little lambs are actually more forward until their parents start bleating at them. You know, and telling them to watch out, you know, that big ugly guy coming, he's not good for you.
And you say, it's okay, I'm vegan, I'm not going to hurt you.
We do keep saying that, but they don't seem to get it.
I think they're not hearing it.
But I think, you know, I do think people, you know, I think they are, and you've made this point to me separately, but they disassociate the food on their plate. They are detached from the horror that goes up in the process to producing that thing that's on the plate that is so, you know, delicious. And a lot of people, not a lot of people, but there have been people who've turned vegan for a little while and then have gone back saying that they're missing something. And I think that, you know, another point that I know you want to talk about is addiction. You know, and I think that you have a particular point to make about cheese, with which I entirely agree. But I think that it perhaps even goes further than that. You know, when you're brought up from a small baby to eat meat, and suddenly it's taken away, I can see that you would think that you're having perceived health reverses because you don't feel quite the same, because your body's been used to that. It's rather like a drug addict, isn't it? You know, you can't just withdraw, you can't withdraw that substance and not expect it to have some kind of deleterious effect.
Absolutely. And I think that is why people sort of drop off, because it does take, I would say, probably 2 to 3 months before your body starts to be normal again, and then better than normal. But better than it was. You mentioned last week, let's not go into too much detail because it is a bit too much information, but you know, a very well functioning bowel is a nice thing to have.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Your body's working.
You know, absolutely. And the, you know, the fiber in a diet, if you're eating healthily, means that is just, you know, that should work swimmingly. But anyway, but it does take a while. There's a thing in cheese called casein, which is well known to have very addictive qualities. And you know, what's not to like about a nice slice of cheese, or melted cheese in something? And thankfully, in 2023, if you walk into any supermarket, you will find a number of cheese replacements, which are great for cooking with. Increasingly tasty just to have on a cracker or something, you know, if that's what you want. But the body needs, it's like sugar, or it's like smoking, or it's like alcohol. If you want to get something out of your system, to begin with, your body has not got to know what to do with itself. And then as it starts to be cleared out, I mean, I think I jokingly said to you that actually these days I'm more addicted to green vegetables and fruit. And I don't say that lightly. If I'm busy working or I'm out and about doing stuff, and I'll go a couple of days of all I've managed to get is a sandwich or some pizza or some sort of junky food like that, very sort of bread-based or whatever, and I haven't had any broccoli for a couple of days, my body really knows it. I'm very aware that it's lacking the nutrients, that the high level of nutrients that it's now come to expect. And I think in the same way that bodies get used to not having those nutrients, because a good point that Dr. Greger says is that if it's not just if you're putting lots of meat and dairy into your body, it's the fact that if your plate is filled with that, there's very little space for the good stuff. So whereas actually half of your plate should be filled with vegetables, there's no room for it. You know, you've got the big piece of meat, you've got maybe some potatoes or something cheesy or something dairy based, and then just a few peas thrown on at the side or whatever, and then you're full. You know, so if you're getting full up, if your tummy's full from eating the stuff that's not giving you the nutrients you need, there's no space for the other stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Dr. Michael Greger is one of my favorite plant-based doctors, and perhaps we should mention at this point that he has a website called nutritionfacts.org, which is all science-based. So on that resource, you can find, you know, answers to any of the questions you might have about how, if you don't stop eating meat, you're going to suffer terrible harm, or you won't get enough protein, and all these usual things that are trotted out. You know, it's fantastic. The information he provides is fantastic. But is there anything that you miss from your non-vegan diet?
I certainly did. I certainly missed cheese, because the replacement cheeses up until, I would say, the past 6 months were not brilliant. But in the past sort of 6 months to a year, the Cathedral, which is a very popular cheese make, the Cathedral cheddar, vegan cheddar, very fantastic. Good. I love that. And there's some really lovely vegan fetas. So having a salad with chopped up feta in it, you know, like, so that's made a big difference. I think eggs has been a thing. And I'm not sure that if that's ever going to be replaceable properly. You know, if you really liked having like a boiled egg or I mean, you can kind of make an omelette. They're not quite the same. So I think but in terms of baking cakes, which people will kind of think, well, how do you do that with the eggs? I mean, you'll testify to this, Tony, on the vegan travel cruises. We get some very nice cakes. I'm not going to advocate too much for this, because sugar is also not very good for us. But it's a treat, you know. They're very nice. So no, I think after a while you just realize all of the replacements are there, and nothing is kind of, you know, why would you? I don't. That's the big thing that baffles me when people become vegan or vegetarian and then go back. I cannot get my head around that.
No, one of the reasons that question occurred to me is because, you know, as you know, Christine and I have just come back from a holiday in Crete, and I did find myself having moments, because it's such a fish-oriented society, also lamb, regrettably. But as we walked past fish restaurants and things, I was thinking, well, I do miss being able to go into any of these restaurants and sit there with a nice glass of wine, and but I don't ever get beyond that. It's not as though I'm being tempted into it, because I find the whole idea of it now revolting. I eating animals and muscles and sinew and blood and guts, it just doesn't appeal to me anymore. Quite the opposite. And so I don't really have any real problem of overcoming those little occasional pangs that I get. So let me ask you this, Kelly, because how do you handle your non-vegan friends?
Yeah, do you know, I have to say that it's becoming a little more challenging for me. The friends I have who are meat eaters tend to be quite respectful. And if we go to a restaurant and there is a lovely menu with vegetarian food on it, they will probably order that. So that's nice, because increasingly I don't love sitting next to someone who's tucking into a piece of meat.
No, I don't.
I found it quite difficult recently. I was at a work thing. There was about 30 people, all going to be, tables close together. And we were all asked to order in advance. There was only one vegetarian option, so I had ordered that. Then I could have got a look at what other people were ordering. Somebody that I knew was going to be sitting near me had ordered octopus. And there's just such a lot of research that's come out recently about how incredibly intelligent octopus.
But you've seen that amazing. Have you seen that amazing? Oh, that amazing documentary. Yeah,
absolutely. And I thought, do you know what? I just can't do it. I can't sit there and have a chatty, lovely time while I look across and someone's tucking into octopus. So I sort of bowed out and I didn't go along. I went and ate somewhere else on my own, which I've never done before. But I just think becoming, I suppose, a little more sensitive to things. And after seeing, the octopus scenario that you were just describing there, I thought it's not for me. So yeah, they're fine and very. My sister is vegan. She's 15 years older than me. So has a lot of, I was going to say retired friends, but let's call them refined friends.
Thank you.
None of whom would even entertain the idea of giving up meat. But every time she goes to their houses, they bring out all of the vegan goodies or snacks or food that they've got for her.
Yes.
And are very happy to do so, and also love eating all of the food that she creates for them when they come over. So I think people are open to it, but they're not quite. I think it's difficult for someone to actually introduce it into their own lives.
Yes.
How are your friends with you, Tony?
They're great. I mean, we get invitations to dinner, and they always, make sure that there are nice things for us to eat there. They go to great lengths. We live in this little medieval village called Elmley Castle in Worcestershire in the Cotswolds, and I mean, it's very much, it has to be said, an agriculturally based community. We've got one couple that actually rear Jacob sheep, and they are, absolutely lovely people. But they have, they talk quite openly about, which ones they're going to put in the freezer and things like that. And one doesn't want to offend people,
no,
and I don't know what your view is on this, but the idea of sort of being lecturing people and telling them how they should behave, virtue signaling and all that, I think that's the wrong approach.
Definitely.
And I often hear friends say, what, in my presence, well, he's vegan, but I believe in a balanced diet, don't you?
Yeah,
and
the
I
word
bite
balanced,
my tongue. You'll be surprised, Kelly, because I don't, on many subjects I don't.
Yeah, that you won't bite your tongue on. No, absolutely. I think people have to get there in their own time and in their own way.
Yes.
And I like to think that just my very presence in a room, as somebody who is not extreme, as someone who is, I'm not radical in that way, that I think the fact that I say, oh no, I'd like the vegan menu, please, or can I have that option? But the people around me, I just think it just puts a little question mark and I've kind of
Yes.
gone, oh, they're doing that. Maybe that's something I'd like to think about. And certainly over the years, people who were sort of vehement meat eaters have become vegetarian or vegan in my life that I've been aware of. And I'm not saying that I'd made that happen, but I just think every time you encounter something that makes you question the refinements of your life,
Yes.
is a good thing. But definitely, to berate somebody will just send them scurrying further in the other direction.
Yes, and even within our own vegan community, if I can put it that way, I can't think of
Yeah.
another expression, but there are people who make decisions that I I find a little bit difficult to understand. So, for instance, you're aware of I think he's described as a philosopher and scientist, Peter Singer. So
Right.
Peter Singer is one of our mutual friends. Valerie is involved in, I forget the name of her organization,
Compassion in world farming.
in
Yes.
world farming.
Yeah.
And she has a great deal of respect for Peter Singer, and I think it's correct that she should have so. But I was reading some of his stuff. I mean, he's very into animal animal rights.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just sort of interested since he is such a huge proponent of that way of thinking, that he describes himself as a flex vegan, which means that, for instance, he'll eat oysters because he doesn't think they are sentient. But further than that, he will eat vegetarian, and he'll even go, I think, further than that if there's something else that isn't available. So he's sort of quite flexible. I just find that a little bit odd, and then there's another guy, I don't know if you've heard of him, because I'm sort of quite a staunch non-believer religious wise, and one of my favorite YouTubers is Alex O'Connor. His label is the Cosmic Skeptic, and he's a young, very young guy, but brilliant. Absolutely one of these people who's absolutely brilliant intellectually, and I just love listening to him. And I liked listening to him on the subject of atheism. But then he suddenly decided that he was going vegan, and he went vegan like in a huge way. He was giving talks all over the world, going physically and giving talks all over the world because he's so well thought of as a speaker. And then suddenly he just announced he ditched it because of his health, which I think, well, he had irritable bowel syndrome or something like that. And I just found it so odd that someone can charge off in one direction and be so evangelical about animal suffering and so on, and suddenly they have this reversal.
Well, do you know what? I think I kind of know the answer to that, because my brother is exactly the same. He was vegan for 30 years, and then 5 years ago or thereabouts, he started eating meat again and eats meat all the time now. And I've tried to get my head around it, because he also would be very sort of, speaking to people about the various horrors that go on in the animal agriculture industry. And I wonder if it's the same for your guy that you've just mentioned. My brother discovered that eating a lot of soya, and I mean a lot of soya, because it was he not a great cook, didn't look after himself at all, and he didn't feel very well. And
Yes.
your guy, maybe if he was busy and he's rushing around and he's not looking after himself, then they start to think, oh well, it's the veganism that's doing that, or it's if you eat loads of anything, it doesn't matter what it is, it's not you could eat loads and loads of vegetables, but there's it's not going to make you feel well. And then I think it's very easy for people to then point the finger at veganism and think, oh well, that's the thing that's done it. And of course, we all have to put ourselves first, because if we're not alive, we can't do anything and help anybody else or do anything like that. So I think a sense of self-preservation probably turned him and my brother back to eating meat, without recognizing that actually maybe they just needed to refine their veganism and actually make it a healthy diet rather than whatever it is they were doing incorrectly.
What do you think about the argument that I hear trotted out quite a lot, that if loads and loads of people went vegan, which is what we all aspire to, for obviously all the good reasons we've talked about, not least the survival of our planet, that there would be many animals who wouldn't come into existence and therefore wouldn't have any life at all.
Well, I mean, you know the answer to this, Tony, that if people think that the life of an animal in the animal agriculture industry is quote unquote a life, then they are very much mistaken. And, you know, you probably know this. I've certainly watched the videos. I don't watch them anymore because they're far too distressing. But I've seen the conditions that animals are kept in, the way that they're slaughtered, all of that kind of stuff. And I don't talk about it because I think people can find that quite sensationalist, and they certainly don't want to hear it. But it's not a life. And if it meant that all that was left were a handful of cows or pigs in a nice animal sanctuary somewhere, I don't think you would find any of them complaining. You know, there is no animal who is in that system that would be saying, you know, I'm glad I've got this life. So that would be, you know, it would be ridiculous. I mean, you get lots of silly things which I just think divert from the actual argument. You'll get people who say, oh, but what if you were on a desert island? Would you eat whatever? Well, I'm not on a desert island. I'm in Sainsbury's and there's a fabulous selection of food here. And of course, if you're on a desert island and you do what you can to survive, but none of us are on that island. So, you know, it's ridiculous. And also the idea of, well, if everyone went vegan overnight, what would we do? That's not going to happen either. So you know, why would we even worry about that? This is going to be a slow drip towards something that's going to help protect the planet, because it's not sustainable. And even people who say, well, I only eat locally sourced grass-fed beef or whatever. Again, that's not sustainable, because you can only feed a very small amount of people with that.
Yes.
If you want to feed billions of people, then you need mass agriculture, and you can either make that
but what about all this plant murder? That's the other one you hear.
Oh, don't, Tony.
I'm just pushing your buttons.
I know you are.
I like to hear.
There's no nervous system. A plant does not have a central nervous system. It doesn't feel pain.
So we're not, you know, we're not slaughtering carrots. We shouldn't be concerned about that.
No, and again, it just is a smokescreen. If people can joke about a screaming carrot, they can forget about the fact that a lobster genuinely does scream when you put it into a pan of boiling water. You know, again, I'm not talking about this kind of stuff because it does feel a bit sort of provoking. But I think it's all just people trying to bat away the real topic.
Just a quick story on that, since you brought it up. You know, and I've mentioned our holiday in Crete, and of course, I mentioned Val and Stuart, who are also, you know, mutual, very dear friends who are vegans. We were together on this for much of this holiday, and we were walking through the village of Plaka, which is a famous village opposite Spinalonga Island. And we walked past a taverna that had a lobster tank outside, and the guy approached us trying to get us to come in and have a juicy, delicious lobster or crayfish. And Valerie said, well, we're vegans. We don't like to see that sort of thing. And actually, it's his response that the taverna owner's response that I found sort of quite touching in a way, because he sort of took the position, you know what, I know it's not good. I know I shouldn't be eating this way. And my children are telling me that. So, you know, we know things are happening with the young, which is good things. And he said, but, you know, I'm too old to change. He was younger than me, by the way. I'm too old to change. But he said, in my next life, I will be vegan.
Oh, my goodness. What an unexpected response.
Well, it's just that he handled it so diplomatically.
Yeah, wow.
And I thought, oh, you know, because it's very easy for people just to get hostile in that situation. You know, you do whatever you want, but don't leave me alone, sort of thing. But I just thought, what a nice man, you know, and what a decent response. Anyway, we are at our 30-minute cutoff point. So have you got anything else that you would like to add before I wrap up?
No, I just want to say, if this podcast is about refinement rather than retirement, I would just say, if this is something that people are interested in, look into it, look into what these doctors are saying. Yes. Because if you are refining your life, why not have the longest refinement you can possibly have and give your body a chance?
Yeah. Lovely. Now I know why you're in communication and journalism. Good for you. That was brilliant. Love chatting with you on this topic, or any topic. I always love talking to you, Kelly. Likewise. So thanks so much. So, dear listeners, that's we're coming to the end of our this episode. We will be doing more on the topic of veganism and many other refinements that we want to talk to you about. We love getting your feedback, and we've been getting lots of it. recently. A lot of you like to do so, and I completely understand why, privately rather than on a public forum. So we have all kinds of channels open to you. We do have a companion blog that goes alongside this podcast, which you can access by going to tonycoe, that's TONYCOE.com. That's also called the same name, Refinement, Not Retirement, as is our Facebook page, where you can also communicate with us either openly or privately, and also our YouTube channel, same again. So we're a young podcast where our audience is growing nicely, and we thank you very much for your support, very much in helping us grow our audience, and for giving us suggestions about topics you'd like to hear us talk about, and for giving us your opinions, which we always like to receive. So that's all for this time. Look forward to seeing you next time. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much. See you next time. Bye-bye.